Well, I'm so glad that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. I value your time as you do, and I always strive to make sure that we give you some content that is going to help you have a better life. And today is definitely no exception. I hope you got a pad and pen. There's going to be lots of great nuggets here for you. We're going to be talking about secrets to negotiating a thriving life with Rand Selig. So welcome, Rand. It's so great to have you here.
Cindy, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, and for those of you who may not know him, Rand holds an MBA from Stanford, and definitely we got an overachiever in the crowd. He also has dual undergraduate degrees in both mathematics and psychology. And for over 35 years, he ran his own financial services firm, managing complex projects globally. And he's lived in and worked in Europe, in Asia, in Mexico, in the Caribbean. I'm so jealous when I read his resume. But I particularly love that Rand is really deeply committed to personal growth. And that led him to write his book, Thriving, which is really catching everyone's attention out there. And the idea behind it is to help others embrace positive change. And let's dig right in, Rand, because in today's world in particular, we could all use a little more of that. And I think it often feels like things are out of our control. I think, it's sort of one of the problems, I think, where people tend to spiral. So I'd love if you could speak to the power of personal choice and how intentional decisions can help us thrive.
Well, you hit on the central theme of my book, which is we have enormous power to choose how we spend our time,
Yeah.
who we spend our time with, what our habits are, and even our feelings.
Yeah.
And so, what are some feelings people are having now? They could be feeling discouraged. They could be feeling angry. They could be fearful. And that's a choice. As opposed to that, you could be positive. I am relentlessly positive, and it pays enormous dividends. I mean, there's always something you can be grateful for. And no matter how many nuggets of bad stuff are around, there's going to be some good things. And that's what you can focus on to feel better and to take control. I like to say when I'm doing public speaking, I pull out a little VW bus and I say, who's driving your bus? How fast, if you're driving the bus, you're choosing how fast to go. You're choosing when to stop. You're deciding when to turn right and when to turn left. You're deciding who to invite on your bus. It's important to continue to invite people on your bus. And unfortunately, it's important sometimes to invite people off your bus. You
Absolutely.
start your life with people already on your bus, and sometimes those people, just aren't helping you move forward.
Yeah, and tied to that, like it strikes me the law of attraction, right? Because I certainly find that when you allow yourself to start feeling sorry for yourself or feeling like things are out of control, it's like this giant magnet that then starts attracting more negativity, and we keep sending messages to our brain, so it starts looking for evidence that everything's crappy. And the opposite is also true. When you choose a positive perspective in life, then you're going to be attracting more positive things. You're going to be looking for more positive things. And I totally agree with you. No matter how dire the circumstances, there is always something to be thankful for. So, I often speak about designing our lives. My daughter and I created this little planner. We called it a purpose planner. And I've seen you to refer to that concept as well about designing the life, and it really caught my attention. So, what are some ways that we can become, architects, if you will, of our own lives to build that foundation?
Well, it starts absolutely with just knowing yourself. It takes a deep dive, and it's not, unfortunately, a one and done. You can't just do it and 20 years later say everything's fine. We continue to change. The world around us
Yeah.
continues to change. So it's really important to continue to get to know yourself. But early on, there's a lot of fundamental elements to who you are. For example, are you introverted? Are you extroverted? And we're living in an extroverted world. So if you're introverted, as I surprise a lot of people by saying I am, because technically I test that way. And in my
Yeah.
book is a little quick free test you can do. And, there's also, I refer to a great book on this subject called Quiet.
Oh, I
Um,
love that book.
Susan Cain is tremendous.
Yeah.
It's just great. So this is an element that is the bedrock of moving forward is getting to know yourself, knowing what you stand for, what you don't stand for, what your values are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Those things sound very ordinary and people have covered that in various times, but it's important to really do it. And I believe that the only way to really do a good job with that is to write it down.
Yeah.
We just can't think it out and say, oh, yeah, I know that stuff. No, you write it down. I lay it out, I think, pretty easily and well in my book. So you can go through the series of exercises and questions you can ask yourself. That's the springboard for then deciding, what do I now want to do?
Yeah.
What kind of life do I want to design for myself?
Yeah.
Part of this question in the world we're living in today is defining what success means.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the messages routinely are that success is about financial things.
Yeah.
And of course, that's an important thing. But I wouldn't say it's the most important. It's certainly not the only important thing. It's important to have really important relationships. In my investment banking career, I've met a lot of wealthy people. I've helped them to become more wealthy by selling their companies and so on. But when I look at them, and I must say, and it's a sad thing to have to report, a lot of these people, in my view, are not successful.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have failed relationships all around them, whether it's business relationships or personal ones. They've not taken care of themselves physically. So they're now suffering through some of that. And a lot of the emotional health is also gone. So these are elements that can be put in place. I like to say, besides designing your own life, you can be the author of your own story.
Yeah.
They're very connected, but they're a little bit different.
Tell us about the author of your own story.
Well, the authoring, and now that I'm a published author, as you are, Cindy, we can talk about this.
Yeah.
You have a choice of what to edit, what to delete.
I like
Because the story, your life story is, sometimes there are parts of it that are not interesting. They're not interesting to you and maybe not interesting to other people.
Yeah.
And so you have that choice. And then moving forward, you can say, what are my options? You're talking about the author of your own story. What does the future look like for you? And that becomes a really very rich, spicy meatball.
Yeah.
that allows this authoring to be a marvelous task.
Yeah. Well, and I love those analogies for starters. And when you were talking about designing your own life, it really struck me that that's what set me on the course about the art of feminine negotiation. At its core, it started about this idea about how we define success. And that came mostly from my practice of law, where I realized the focus was on getting those sort of 6-minute billable increments, getting those clients, getting more. It was just never enough. It was all about winning or losing, and how we define success. So, I had my epiphany that it was fatally flawed you hit the nail on the head, frankly, Rand, that the relationships suffer professionally and personally. Your sense of self takes a hit. So I love getting back to this idea again about owning our own experience, not play. We tend to play the blame game. We blame other people. This person made me feel this way or made me do this. It's like, own that experience. I'd love to chat a bit about setbacks. I mean, they're inevitable, and yet I don't know what your thoughts are. I find we're a very failure phobic society, right? So I'd love some of your insights on, overcoming challenges and how do we build better resilience through those setbacks that are invariably going to hit us.
Well, it's not the most enjoyable thing to want to take on, but we learn more from our failures and our setbacks than we do from the easy peasy stuff that happens. Part of what my walk around the block has been is being a Little League coach and a scoutmaster.
Yeah.
And what I saw a lot of parents doing, these are really well-intentioned parents, and they have a lovely family. They're nice people. They're doing well. But there's a lot of tendency to try to step in and have the kid avoid the problem, erase the problem.
Yeah.
And that denies the kid the chance to learn how to solve the problem themselves. Even if there's a little bit of scrapes on the knees in the process of it, they know, and you make it clear that you're always there. Your hand is out to get them out of the hole if they need help with that. But they're the one who have to figure out what to do and how to do it. And with your encouragement, but
Yeah.
you let them do it. And without you letting them do it, you're robbing them of those experiences and the chance to grow and learn from mistakes as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They call us the snow plowing parenting generation, I think. And when I first heard that term, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was mortified because I recognized it's like we're snow plowing all the problems out of their way, trying to clear that path so there's no adversity. And you're so right, Rand. Like in hindsight, if I had to do over again, we robbed all of those multitude of opportunities for them to be able to learn and grow. And, a friend of mine, we were talking earlier about giving credit, a friend of mine came up with this expression, failabrations. And I just loved it. She said, we
Oh,
should sit with our families and, every night or at least once a week and say, what did you fail at spectacularly today? And what did you learn? So, just really putting a spin on how we define that failure concept. I thought that was brilliant. So,
well, the epicenter for product design in the United States is at Stanford. There's something called the D School. It's actually not, you don't get a degree from the D School, but you
yeah,
can get a degree through the mechanical engineering department or whatnot. And what they advocate is to fail often and early.
yeah,
And that's where you begin designing a better and better product.
yeah.
And the product can be you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so true. Yeah. And it's true, fail often and early because every time when we get rid of our inhibitions that way as well. We let go of once you release so much of that fear, ironically, when we release the fear of failure, it allows us to succeed in much more creative and expansive ways. You get better ideas, you think outside the box more. So and you're speaking about sort of Stanford. I know in your work you speak to the science of thriving, and that really caught my attention as well. So how do we sort of bridge that gap, if you will, between you've got sort of the psychology, the mindset piece around this, but also needing those practical tools so that we can actually get out there and live our best lives? What are your thoughts on that?
That's what I especially like about the work I've been doing the last few years is this intersection, the overlap, the interconnection of the science and then the personal lived experience.
Yeah.
For example, one of the studies that I refer to is a study that talks about the 7 personal qualities that lead to life satisfaction and achievement.
Hmm.
It's a study. They've
Yeah.
studied, it's a longitudinal study. They've checked in with a lot of people, and the 7 qualities are qualities that you can check yourself out. You say, how am I doing with these
Yeah.
7 qualities? Where am I strong? Where am I just, I'm scoring well into the 90s and I'm,
Okay.
self-scoring. I'm very happy with that. And where do I really need to buckle down and start spending some more time? I'll give you a couple of examples of
Yeah,
these
I'd
7.
love to hear about that.
Happy to go through all 7, but,
Yeah.
in no particular order is zest. Then
Mm.
there's grit.
Yeah.
Then there's optimism, which I refer to as being positive.
Yeah.
There's curiosity. Oh, I love curiosity. So enormously important. We can talk about that some more. Gratitude. And one of the quotes, I have a lot of quotes in my book. One of the quotes about gratitude that comes into play with what we've been talking about is the suffering ends when gratitude
Yeah,
begins.
it's true.
Huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
Self-control,
Mm.
social intelligence, and because I'm an author, I add an 8th one, which is humor.
Yeah, absolutely. I love zest. I haven't heard that one in the list before, and I love that. I think that's so true, and it
Yeah.
covers a lot. And grit, it's interesting. I had forgotten until you just said that, Rand, that I think it was about a decade ago, there was some very big study done as well about what was the number one quality that you saw in successful people, and grit was sort of that factor. And you said you want to speak about curiosity. I'd love to unpack that now. It's a big part of my art of feminine negotiation because I call it the art of curiosity or the art of fascination. When you can show up with curiosity in life, the sky is the limit in terms of your ability to build relationships and get better outcomes. So I'd
So
love your
true.
perspective.
Well, curiosity to me, I got that as a gift from my mom, and so I've lived that my whole life. And my wife is a very curious person, so that just reinforces things all the way along.
Yeah,
Curiosity makes life fun.
yeah,
When you think about an adventure you had, maybe a trip you took, and you went to some place where they eat different food, they dress differently, their architecture is different, they're speaking differently. Maybe it's English but in a different dialect or
Yeah.
something. You enjoy the trip. Why? Because you're learning and you're curious. You keep saying it. You're still going to go home. You're going to go back to, wherever and whatever you were doing. But that moment in time where you can just learn and keep your eyes open and
Yeah.
listen, it makes life really fun. Being a lifelong learner is a
Yeah.
huge part of being curious. It's one of what I think is one of the keys to aging well. Everybody ages, but not everybody ages well.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the, again, a different group of things, but a lot of overlap with the seven personal qualities. There's a bonus here, Cindy, about having curiosity, and that is it helps a lot with conflict resolution.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you think about a time when you're working with somebody. It could be in the business world. It could be a legal situation. It could be just with a friend. And something comes up and they say something, you think, wow, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How could they possibly? And rather than say to them, that's dumb, oh, tell me more about that ridiculous idea. No, you get curious
Yeah.
and you ask in a very genuine way, hey, that's interesting, I'm curious,
Yeah.
please tell me how you got to that place, and then follow it up with more questions about it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're going to agree with them. It doesn't mean you're going to change your point of view, but it does mean you're probably going to learn more about who they are.
Yeah.
That's going to shore up a relationship, even if there's a fairly big gap on that particular issue.
Yeah. Gosh, we could do a whole episode about that. As you're saying it, my mind's just like zing, zing, zing. Because, like in traditional negotiations, any conflict resolution, and in the practice of law, oh my gosh, I saw this over and over again. Lawyers were so trained to just be entrenched in the rightness of your position and your client's position and sort of pushing that agenda forward. And in fact, invariably, when we can release that and show up with curiosity in whether it's in litigation, whether it's in our, negotiations with service providers or business deals, showing up with curiosity to truly understand what the other party needs
Yeah.
just absolutely opens up. And it's funny because, not to get too political, but I remember Hillary Clinton got crucified for saying a version of that we need to understand our enemies. At least we need to truly seek to understand what their thoughts are and their motivations. And gosh, the world is so polarized now. Everybody's so convinced about the rightness of their positions, and curiosity
Well,
is beautiful.
in running my own firm for over 3 decades, I've closed 250 or more transactions.
Yeah.
All of them I had accounting firms and law firms
Yeah.
kind of coordinating through me. I was the sort of nucleus of these transactions. And where I come from is a place of win-win. Win-win. That's where a transaction really
Yeah.
comes together, where people are happy at the end of the day. They shake hands. They're really looking forward to what comes next in whatever
Yeah.
the transaction was that you do. And if you're out there just trying to draw blood and get every
Yeah.
last dime and so on,
Exactly.
you may close the deal,
Yeah.
but you may not have really accomplished that much. Unfortunately, in the M&A world, the merger and
Yeah.
acquisition world, which has been a huge part of my career, more than 50% of transactions fail
Yeah.
because they may close, the architecture may be right,
Yeah.
but they didn't do some of these win-win issues and thinking
Yeah.
through how are people going to work together? What do they need? And what do we
Yeah.
need to inject into the transaction now to
Yeah.
make sure those things happen?
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's true. I think often we go for what we think is the win in that moment, but study after study shows that long term, those agreements tend to fall apart, or at the very least, they inhibit any ability to get any future agreements. When one party's looking to exert power over the other, there's a high cost that comes with that, right? So, and I want to circle back just on the curiosity piece for our listeners out there. Rand talked a bit about some of the parenting issues, right? About that, failure and how we teach our kids and allowing them the opportunities to deal with adversity. And I'd add curiosity to that list. Like, for the love of God, instill curiosity in your kids. When you're doing everything for them, when you're always giving them the answers to things, you are depriving them of the opportunity to be curious about their lives. And in doing that, I mean, I assume you agree, Rand, you're depriving them of the opportunity to really thrive fully in life without that curiosity. So,
So completely right. And again, I come back to something I think I said before. You know, we continue to change
yeah,
ourselves throughout life, and the world around us clearly is changing. So, how do you navigate through that?
yeah,
It's not the smartest people, it's not the strongest people
yeah,
who are going to win or be happy. It's going to be the people who adapt. We,
yeah,
we know that. We know that. That's a fairly basic
yeah,
scientific thing that Darwin and lots of other
yeah,
people have talked about.
yeah,
So spot on, Cindy,
yeah.
spot on about this.
And I love that you've talked about growth as well. And I want to really again put a pin in for our listeners because, and I remember it was an eye opener for me reading the book Mindset about that difference between a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I would have thought for sure I was growth mindset, right? I mean, I'm adventurous and what, but as I was reading the book, and I think a lot of lawyers and, the author points this out are we're in fixed mindsets because we don't want to fail, right? If we're afraid of that failure or we don't want to try things that we don't know we're going to be really good at, we don't want to give up that impression that we've got a certain status. So, my gosh, having that growth mindset and allowing yourself to just really embrace it, such a difference in life. So,
Well, I've done a lot of speaking over the last year to in front of audiences of different sizes, a lot of podcasts, and sometimes I throw out this concept that I think it appears to help a lot of people. If you realize that life is just a series of experiments, and we know from whether it's high school or whatever, some experiments work.
yeah,
Some experiments work the first time. Some work only after a second or third iteration and a
yeah,
tweaking, and some fail.
yeah,
So if life is like that,
yeah,
just life is like that, then it's full of these little potholes and other things. And that's just part of it. It's not like every time you come across some experiment that didn't work out, you don't have to begrudge it and feel bad. You can just say, okay, let's keep
yeah,
going. We get the light bulb took 1,000 efforts to,
yeah.
to
That's
get
so
created,
true.
you know,
Yeah,
and Thomas Edison didn't lament that. When asked about it, he says, are you feeling bad that, 999 times you failed? He says, no, no, this was just the chance to get it right.
yeah.
I had to go through that whole long process to finally get one that worked.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, Rand, right? It's a choice. The
Yeah.
perspective you bring to any situation is a choice. Now, I'd love to talk for a sec about that sustaining energy and sustaining that joy, because I think sometimes we kickstart these new beginnings in our lives, but then we often fail to sort of sustain that energy and joy. So what tips do you have for maintaining the kind of vitality that'll allow us to thrive more fully in our lives?
Well, again, who's driving the bus?
Yeah.
And if you're saying I'm the driver, and I've learned things in my life from parents, from teachers, from bosses, and what their messages are, I've absorbed the parts of those messages that are right for me,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be me, which means I'm going to create a set of new messages also, in addition to the messages I've accepted. Then you have a lot of power. You have and you become attractive. You were talking
Yeah.
about you attracting things, but you
Yeah.
become attractive as a person, as a personality. And so when we integrate a series of things in our lives, people say, I don't understand how you could be doing all the things you're doing. You're running a company, you've written a book,
Yeah.
you're out there speaking, you're being of service, in your local marsh. You've got a great family. Your wife seems to put up with you.
Yeah.
You know, what's
And
going
that
on?
that takes a lot.
Well, after 45 years, you
Oh
betcha.
my.
And my answer to that is it's not about balance. This word balance, I think, is
Yeah.
confusing. I don't think it helps. It's not balancing work and life, it's an integration.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
much
nice.
more powerful way of thinking about it. I'm integrating things that I really care about. I'm integrating the me part of it, which is my physical self. Am I sleeping well? Am I eating well? Am I emotionally healthy? And we
Yeah.
can talk about that. I've got some very specific things I'd like to share with you, Cindy, and your listeners.
Yeah.
Am I emotionally healthy? Let me be a dead honest. What's the story with my relationships?
Yeah.
How strong are they? How deep and enduring are they? How am I doing financially?
Yeah.
Yes, you need to inject that kind of part of into this question of integration. How am I being of service? Because if
Yeah.
it's only about you,
Yeah.
then I don't think you can be happy, frankly.
Yeah.
Maybe you can, maybe temporarily, but it feels very sort of shallow and
Yeah.
hedonistic to me. Being happy to me is a lot about becoming invisible and focusing on helping something else out, whether it's the natural world or
Yeah.
another person, maybe a neighbor.
Wow, that was powerful. A lot packed in there. And I really like that distinction with that integration versus balance, because we do throw this balance word around. And I think everybody's under the mistaken view that you're going to hit, there's a perfect state. If you can just hit it, if you can just find, as opposed to it being a verb where you're constantly sort of, in that transition, as you say, integrating. I think that was a great, because I know I can't believe how quick our time is going here. You said you really want to touch on the emotional piece. So why don't you share that with us now?
Well, I mentioned a few minutes ago that there are some keys to aging well, and there is an overlap with this, the personal qualities that we went through, and
Yeah.
I just ran through. But
Yeah.
it starts with being positive. It adds right away having purpose. And I've
Yeah.
spoken at a number of retirement homes, and I say it's really important that you have purpose all the way to the end.
Yeah.
You're taken care of here financially. You took care of that, or your family did. You're here, and what gets you up in the morning? What
Yeah.
keeps you going? If you have purpose, and even if the purpose is just to be kind
Yes.
and asking people, how everything's going for them here, where did they come from, what kind of lunch did they most enjoy? These kinds of things. It's a way of being kind and respectful, listening, asking questions, showing acts of loving kindness. That kind of thing is enormously great purpose.
Yeah.
And when I've spoken at these retirement homes, I see people open their eyes and say, this can be the new me.
Yeah.
I can have that as part of my legacy of who I am and what I'm all about.
Yeah. And I want to just put a
So
pin in that. I thought when you just said about it, that purpose can be just simply being kind. What a powerful purpose that is. And I think it goes back around to what you're saying about how we define success, right? Right.
yeah,
Defining success is all about the almighty. Who cares if you've got $1 billion if you're not a kind person? If you don't come from a place of service, what is the point? What is the
yeah.
purpose of
What
any
is
of that?
the point?
That,
What is the point?
oh,
So,
that,
so in this list of the 10 keys to
yeah.
aging well, I have three that are all about being emotionally healthy.
Okay.
So this isn't waiting till you're 80 years old. This
Yeah.
this is this is going on as you're doing your transactions as a lawyer, as you're raising kids, wherever you are in life. These things apply. And
Yeah.
so the three that I talk about is stop self-sabotage.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Now, this is not an issue for me. I'm very fortunate to say that. But there are a lot of people, I keep coming, and I'm so shocked. I first encountered that when I was a math tutor in college.
Yeah.
And people would come into the office hours, and within a minute, they would say, I'm not good at math.
Yeah.
And I'd say, okay, well, let's work through some problems. And we'd work through problems. And then after we solved half a dozen, I said, well, you try one. And, maybe with a little bit of suggestion, they'd get it. And
Yeah.
finally, they'd say, hey, math is fun.
Oh,
Math is cool. I
yeah.
like it. So I saw this self-sabotaging thing, and I continue to see it again and again. And you can't get in the game
Yeah.
if you keep self-sabotaging. So that's one. Another is to forgive. Oh
Mm.
my gosh. Who are you forgiving? Well, you're forgiving other people who somewhere along the line did something that made you feel bad. Maybe it hurt your feelings. Maybe you resented whatever was
Yeah.
going on. And they didn't apologize. And you
Yeah.
think that they should have given you an apology.
Yeah.
So what do you do? And especially, what do you do if that person's gone out of your life? Maybe they're off the planet as well.
Yeah.
Well, I say write a letter.
Yeah.
Write a letter explain what happened. Again, it's from your perspective. I think it will help if you're honest and say, I contributed a little bit to this problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't 100% them. I aided and abetted some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And the letter goes on to say, I think you owe me an apology. You didn't give me one, but I'm forgiving you. And what you're doing at that moment is you're taking this heavy rock out of your backpack.
Wow. Isn't that
You're
the truth?
doing the same thing as forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
Who on the planet has not made a mistake or did
Yeah.
something and say, yeah, that wasn't the best me?
Yeah.
You got to forgive yourself and turn those mistakes into valuable lessons. That's two.
Yeah.
And the third is just letting go. Now, this, I have to tell you, Cindy, was the hardest thing for me of these three because I've been all about being in control.
Yes.
Here I am
Guilty.
running around as the, big cheese.
Yeah.
Well, what I began to realize, and my adult children helped me realize that, is that you know what I control are four things. I control my attitude.
Yeah.
I control the amount of effort I'm willing to put into something. I control my behavior and I control my actions.
Yeah.
That's all about me. After that, it's a series of concentric circles. And after that, it's maybe I have influence, which I can diminish or expand depending on how I behave around that and how I interact with people.
Yeah.
So this letting go, and I like doing this little exercise. I say, okay, I hold up my fist. Go ahead, you can do that too.
Yep.
And you're holding on to something you really wish you could let go of.
Yeah.
You see your knuckles. You're holding on tight. You see your knuckles. You're looking, saying, I want to let go of this, but you haven't. You turn your fist over and your fist again, you see the knuckles. They're still, and you're saying to yourself, I really want to let go of this. Maybe, and I joke, maybe because you read Rand's book, Thriving, you figure out you have a lot of power and you open your fingers, you wiggle your hand and your fingers and your thumb, and your hand is rising because you've let go of that thing. You're no longer carrying the heavy stones around with you. I used to do that exercise a bunch when I first discovered it. And now I don't have to do it very often because I'm a little more humble. I realize that, I'm not in control.
And it's interesting. It actually felt physically lighter as soon as I opening the hand. So that's a great sort of in the moment to literally do it. And I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners. And I hope you jotted those down. Go, come back and re-listen to this if you need me. Grab the book and go through them. Because that forgiveness piece, when I think, Rand, of the wasted time and emotional energy holding on to ill feelings about things, and what an inordinate relief it was to finally release it. And again, certainly for lawyers, I could speak to my old profession, that need to be in control, right? We don't surrender easily, and to be able to let go. So such beautiful advice. And
letting go, just let me add this one thing. Letting go is not resigning.
Yes.
It's not resigning. It's actually being more in charge of you.
Yeah, that's so true.
And being more in charge of you means that you can make the choice of saying, hey, this isn't the biggest, most important, and I can look for win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. We're going to have you back because there are so many little threads here that I would just love to pull and unravel even more, but such fabulous tidbits. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life, Rand? It doesn't have to be about this thriving issue, just one of those aha moments where you see things differently or think of them differently.
Well, I have to share a story about my relationship with my father. My father is a towering, enormous figure. He passed away 2 months ago, and we'll actually be burying him at Arlington National Cemetery very soon. But he's that big a guy, and it was a little bit like two bulls, the young bull and the old bull butting heads.
Yeah.
And boy, it made our relationship very, very hard. And I finally realized, it took a long time. It was probably 20 years ago. I said, Dad's not going to change.
Yeah.
If there's going to be change in this relationship, it's going to come from me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to respect him. I'm going to have to listen to his stories, even though I've heard them many times before. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to have to tell him that I appreciate so many of the important gifts that have made me who I am, that came directly from him. Others came from mom. I picked my parents very well.
Yeah.
And this was a moment of a lot of personal growth.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to get there. And it was helped, frankly, by a friend who's a psychologist saying, write a letter. Write a letter to the dad you wish you had,
Yeah.
the dad you think you deserve. Say, hey, we just spent this great weekend together. We talked about so many important things. We had so much fun together. That's maybe not the dad you have now,
Yeah.
but you can invent this other dad. And now I have two dads.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that. And such a powerful insight. As you were saying that, I was thinking for every aspect of our life, how many of our intimate relationships do we see around us where people's intimate relationships fail because the one or both parties are expecting to change the other as opposed to recognizing, okay, I can't control them or who they show up as, so I need to make a choice. Is this a relationship that is worth me coming with a different perspective, right? And trying it that way. So I think that's beautiful. So where can people learn more about you, Red?
My book is available everywhere at Amazon and all the independent bookstores.
Beautiful.
You can go to the book website, which is www.randselig.com, RANDSELIG.com. A lot of information about the book, some phenomenal testimonials, some more information about me. You can connect with me. You can download 40 of my favorite quotes from the book. People say they love these quotes. They're organized by chapter,
Nice.
which helps. So if you're not particularly interested in one chapter, we'll just, maybe there's
Yeah.
two or three others that'll be
Yeah.
appealing. You can connect with me. You can ask me a question. You can invite me to do something, and so on. So that's
And
there.
we'll make sure to put that in the show notes for listeners. Don't panic if you're in the middle of something and listening or otherwise distracted. Just check out the show notes and we'll make sure the book is called Thriving. And again, it's Rand Selig, and we will make sure to have all of that info and details available for you in our show notes. So thanks so much, Rand. I really enjoyed the conversation. Like I say, we're going to have to make more time next time. Great to have.
Thank you, Cindy. Really enjoyable.
Yeah, and for our listeners, I have no doubt there was just so much value here in this episode. Take any one of these little nuggets to start with and move forward, and then add the next one and add the next one, and you can start to design your beautiful life. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And I always say give the gift of sharing, particularly for episodes like this where we're talking about being able to negotiate your thriving life. Everybody can benefit from that, so be sure to share this episode. And before we sign off, just wanted to share some ways we can work together if you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills and recognize that all of life is a negotiation. I've got everything from online to my group to my signature VIP mastermind experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com and make sure to get a copy of my book of the same name if you have not done that yet, The Art of Feminine Negotiation. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and you can start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.